Thank you so much, Melissa, and thank you to Local First for hosting today and for all of your incredible work to serve our community in these unprecedented times. And thanks to everyone who's joining us today. I know that there's a lot that you could be doing, and I appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us today. So I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about Javelina and how we have been supporting our clients with crisis communications in the last few weeks. And then we're going to today really talk about what effective crisis communications looks like at the moment and how that might translate for your organization. So to start off with Javelina, so for those of you that are not familiar, we are headquartered here in Phoenix, but we have an office in Denver, Colorado as well. And we work with all different kinds of organizations, so nonprofits, businesses, and including political candidates and political causes, to advance change-focused campaigns to create change in their local community. So the way that we do that is we work with our clients to bring together powerful stories and also help them organize people around those stories so that they can create the change that they really care about in their community. So if you think of a corporate marketing firm and a grassroots organizing organization, if those two things had a baby, it would be Javelina. Because we know that to create powerful change, you really need both. You need the ability to tell this powerful story and really to rally people around that powerful story. And what we've been doing with our clients in the last few weeks is helping them figure out, how do we communicate effectively? What do we say immediately? And how does that translate into who we're saying, what we are saying to who as we move forward? And so we're going to be touching on all of those things today. And I want to start off by telling a story that I think is particularly pertinent to these times. It's something that I have talked about with my team for many years, but it has come up again and again with our clients in the past few weeks. And I want to share it as a kickoff today because I think it really speaks to a lot of the themes that you all are facing and the challenges that you're contending with. So when I was younger, I grew up in England, and I grew up in the middle of the country, so it was very wet and very rainy most of the time. And I would just live for the 2 weeks in the summer where we would go and stay with my grandparents who lived in the south of England. And they, if you went to the south of England, your chances of seeing a sunny day in the British summer were that bit higher. And my perfect version of those 2 weeks was just spending as much time around water as I could. So we went to the beach a lot, we went to the public pool a lot. And something I got very, very used to hearing over and over and over when we went to the pool from my parents and then any other adult that was standing close by was, you don't run by the pool. And I feel like, and this will be familiar for a lot of you, especially those of you that grew up in Arizona and spend a lot of your summer around water, that it might be a vivid memory that you remember running by the pool and some grown-up nearby says, don't run by the pool, don't run by the pool. And the way it was always explained to me is that you don't run by the pool because the surface is slippery, and if you run, your chances of falling over and breaking a hip or cracking your head open are much higher. And so it is not safe to run by the pool. I never questioned it. I sort of always took it as on face value and did not run by the pool like the rule-abiding young woman that I was. And then I grew older, and in college, I was doing a public health class, and we did sort of a basic introductory life-saving course run by a lifeguard. And that lifeguard told us again and invited us all to remember that we were told when we were younger not to run by the pool, and asked us, why didn't you run by the pool? And everybody said, it's dangerous, you might fall over. And he said, yeah, that's true. But the real reason that we don't really want you to run by the pool if we're a lifeguard is that running is a sign of panic, and panic is a contagious feeling. If you run and you create panic and somebody else sees that, then they are more likely to feel panic and act in a panicky way. And if you create a feeling of panic with a large number of people around a large pool of water, your chances of creating a dangerous situation where people could really, their lives could be in danger, are vastly increased. And so, yes, while it's dangerous to run on a slippery surface, it's really that feeling of creating panic that we don't want to do. And so I've shared this story with my team time and time again. And really the point is that panic is contagious. And that if you panic, if you create a feeling of chaos, the people around you will pick that up immediately. And it has been so relevant these last few weeks with our clients. In your communications, if there's one thing that you take away from today, it is this rule, which is don't run by the pool. Don't create panic in how you are communicating to your stakeholders, because they will adopt that and they will subconsciously layer that into their response. So that's the sort of opening story I want to share in terms of framing this. And then before we jump into more detailed content, I want to tell you a little bit more about me and why I'm driven to do this work. So I'm very lucky to have two brothers, and my two brothers are incredibly important to me and have had a huge impact on my life. This is my younger brother, the day that he was born. And he has taught me so much. He has taught me the power of teamwork. He has also taught me that you must always have fun and make sure that you're laughing. Today, he teaches women's collegiate soccer in Massachusetts. And he continually just blows me away with his dedication to continual learning and growing. And he inspires me on a daily basis. And I have learned just as much from my older brother. This is my older brother. This is my older brother, Rory. And very sadly, Rory passed away in an accident right before his third birthday when I was 6 months old. It was just a few weeks after this picture was taken. And I don't remember Rory's death, and I don't know what it's like to lose a child, but I do know what it's like to grow up with a front row seat to this kind of loss and to see what grief like that does to a family. And I've learned really two incredible, powerful lessons from Rory that I carry with me in my daily work. And the first is that suffering creates a cage around what we think the world will offer us and what we think we are capable of. And so I'm really driven to alleviate suffering in any way that I can in our community by supporting the organizations that do that important work. And then secondly, what Rory taught me is that the greatest tool any one of us have to alleviate suffering on a daily basis is intentional kindness. And so that's an incredibly important value to me as well. And that has come up again and again and again in the last few weeks, that in the face of this incredible suffering and incredible uncertainty, intentional kindness is the most powerful tool that we have on any given level. And so I share that story sort of as background of who you are at your core is an important part of how you communicate, because this is true for individuals, but it's also true for organizations. And that is something that we're going to talk about today. So before we go too much further, I want to get a sense of who is joining us today. And so I'm going to ask you two quick questions, and you'll see a poll pop up on your computer in front of you. And so if you can take a few seconds to answer this poll question, that would be great. So first of all, I want to know what kind of organization are you? A business, a nonprofit, political candidate or cause, or a government agency, or other? And if you're other, if you can tap into the chat box how you would describe yourself, that would be super helpful for me. And we'll leave that up for a few more seconds. Okay, quite a mix here. So half of the organizations are businesses. It looks like 21% nonprofit, 25% government agencies, and then so quite a mix, which is great. So I'll keep that in mind as I go through the content. And then my next question is, what is the size of your team? Is it just you? 1 to 5 people, 6 to 10, 11 to 20, or over 20. So if you can just take a few seconds to answer that second question on the screen that popped up in front of you. Also quite a mix. Okay, so we've got 15% of solopreneurs, it looks like. The majority, 41%, have a 1 to 5 team, and then we have some bigger teams here as well, with 25% being over 20. Great. So very mixed crowd today, which is great, and I will keep that in mind as we move through the content. So what we are going to be talking about today is what the definition of effective crisis communications is, and then go through a roadmap of how to practice it. I will stop, as Melissa said, I will stop a few times and pause for questions. So if things come up for you as we go, please type those into the chat box, but I'll be sure to leave time for questions at the end as well. Okay, so we are going to start by jumping into some tactics. When we're talking about crisis communications, a lot of it is very strategic, and some of it is very tactical. And I want to jump in right off the bat with some high-level do's and don'ts that apply for organizations, no matter what your communication challenges or questions. So the number one is don't stop asking. And I really want to underline this as one of the 3 most important points I'm going to make today, because the most common question that we are getting at the moment is it even appropriate for me to be making asks right now? Whether your ask is a fundraising ask, if you're a nonprofit, whether you're asking volunteers to donate their time, whether you're asking customers to continue to purchase your service or your product. All of us right now, selling is a fundamental part of what we do, whether you're selling a product, a service, a thing, whatever it might be. And it feels like a very strange time to be asking. People are saying, our communities are hurting, and I just feel very, very strange right now going in and making asks of people. Now, the challenge with that is it is based on the assumption that by asking somebody to give you something, no matter what that might be, that you are taking something away from them. And it really misses that, in fact, your product, your service, whatever it is you're offering, has the potential to offer great value to your target audience. And when we stop asking, we take that decision-making power away from our target audience. We are deciding that this isn't what they need right now. And many people are searching for ways to support their local community. And by buying your product, by donating to your nonprofit, by giving their time, is a really important way that they can add value, not only to their community, but to their lives. And so it's not a case of not asking, it's a case of being very clear about why you're asking. And I think it is very important to acknowledge the current circumstances and how that changes things. And if you are struggling with this, the more vulnerable, the better. It is perfectly acceptable to say to your target audience, it is very hard for me to ask you right now to buy our product, to donate to our cause, whatever it might be. And the reason that I am doing so is because the thing that we're offering is vital in this way. And by giving, by purchasing, by donating, whatever the action you're asking from people, by doing that, you are helping our community in this core way. And the key there is to be really clear about the value proposition that you offer. Now, this was always true. This was always a fundamental part of communicating, and it's just more true right now. Your rate of return may decrease, but you actually might see that it will increase. We know that Arizona Gives Day this year had record levels of giving because people are desperate to contribute and help those around them, because they know that people are really, truly suffering and struggling. So do not stop asking. The next thing is, don't focus only on what you're not doing, and do communicate what you're doing instead to serve your customers and community. So don't focus on storefront closures, event cancellations, product eliminations, cutting workforce necessarily. I mean, you can talk about those things for sure, but really the headline should be, our purpose hasn't changed. We are still driven to do this particular thing. And how that looks for us in the age of COVID-19 is these things. And I'll share an example of that in a little bit. But that shift of emphasis is really important. Don't pander to new customers or services outside of your expertise. It's very easy to do this. It's very easy to panic and think, we need more people, we need new customers. But this is a big mistake that I see people doing. Instead, ask, how do we serve our current clientele, our current target audiences in new and creative ways? Don't just try a bunch of random ideas you see other people do. And this is very easy to do as well. So-and-so is doing this webinar, or this group have done this discount on their services. It's very easy to see others and think that you should be doing the same thing. And maybe you should, but you don't have to try everything. And so what I would do instead is really brainstorm with your team, with your friends, whatever that might look like. What are all the things that we could try? Get creative. Now is the time to get creative. And then prioritize the ideas to follow through on, and try one thing at a time. See how it goes, test, iterate, and go through that way. We talked about this already, but don't run at the pool. Don't panic. Panic is contagious. It's contagious with your staff. It's contagious with your clientele. Instead, be very clear about who is in charge of communicating what and to whom. And we'll talk a little bit more about messaging in a little bit. And then linked, don't get too overwhelmed with new initiatives and ideas. The most important story that you need to tell is how you as an organization are experiencing and responding to COVID-19 and its impacts. And so if it is as simple as documenting what you are doing on a day-to-day basis and sharing that in your social media, that will be incredibly powerful. People are connecting with one another on a very human level, more so than ever. And just doing that, starting there, we'll see translate into great return. Okay, so at this point, I want to ask one more question to get a sense of how people are feeling on the webinar, which is how are you feeling about your communications at this time? So you'll see the next poll pop up, and if you can take a few seconds to answer that, it would be great. So are you feeling fairly good about your comms, and you're here to pick up some pro tips? Some good, some bad, but you're looking to improve. You feel like you're completely behind in this department and really want help, and then you just feel completely lost. So if you can just take a few seconds to answer that question, that'd be great. Okay, mixed bag, but definitely looking good. So for the most part, people feel good. They can make some improvements. They could maybe, build in some pro tips to improve even more. And then a few people feeling like they really need some help. So hopefully there'll be content in here for all of you. So having gone sort of very tactical, I am going to go super high level and start off with, what is the definition of effective crisis communication? So for us, the definition of effective crisis communication is serving your organization and advancing your purpose during volatile times through proactive and disciplined messaging to your stakeholders. One of the things that is really, really important to note about this period of time and how we're communicating as organizations is that usually when we talk about crisis communication, it is because a brand or an organization has made a mistake and they need to run damage control. This is very different. This is not as much about organizations having made mistakes, and it really is about how they are responding to a situation that is completely outside of their control. And yet the fundamentals of effective crisis communication is the same. How are you serving your organization and advancing your purpose in these unsure times through proactive and disciplined messaging to your stakeholders? So there's a bunch that goes into that, and I'm going to break it down into a step-by-step process. And as you're going through this, if you have pen and paper close by, I would try and answer these questions for your organization. The ones that you get stuck on would be the place to come back to and spend more time thinking about. Okay. So this essentially is the roadmap. These are the step-by-step process, and I'm going to talk about each one in more detail. So number one, what are our objectives? What are the goals that we want to achieve out of our communications right now? Number two, who is the target audience? Number three, what is our story? What are the words that we're saying? And then number four, what is our strategy? What are the tactics that we're using to get this message out into the world? So to start off, what are our objectives? So setting these communications goals is really important. And if right now, again, with your pen and paper, if you can jot down, these are the goals for our communications right now, fantastic. If you're stuck on this, then after this webinar is finished, come back and spend a little bit more time thinking about this. One thing that's really important to note here is that you may need to let go of goals that you set before you had even heard of coronavirus. That a lot of organizations have done advanced planning and they've gone into the fiscal year or the calendar year with plans and goals and objectives. And it can sometimes be a very conscious process to let go of that and decide that we are going to develop new goals for a new time. And that will serve you far, far better. And so developing a short list of very clear goals for what you want your communications to achieve. So do we want to, is it about reaching new people in the community? Is it about serving our existing community in really powerful ways? Is it about responding to a specific need? Is it about meeting a sales goal? What do you need your communications to achieve for you in the coming weeks? And then the next question, who is the target audience? So it can be really easy to think about target audience as people out there that you are communicating to. And oftentimes one of the biggest mistakes organizations make is they miss their internal crowd that they're communicating to. So your board of directors, your staff, your partners, your vendors, the people that are more of your internal audience. Your clients and your customers, the people that you provide a service for, are of course a really important audience, and then your community at large. So for most organizations, target audiences will fall into these broad buckets, and it can be really important and really helpful for you to, one, get more specific about describing each of these four audiences for you. So for your organization specifically, who are they? And the more specific, the better. So, our team might be the 4 people we have on our payroll, plus the 3 contractors that we work with, and our board of directors. And your clients and your customers might be, women, young women who live in Phoenix, because that happens to be your clientele, whatever it might be. But the more specific you can do, the better. And then another thing, that the second step, so the first step is to get crystal clear on who are these people for you. And the second step is prioritize them. Who is the most important? So for us, when we were developing our communication strategy for ourselves, when Javelina we identified that the team was the most important group of people we needed to communicate with first, then our clients, then our vendors, then our community. And that's not to say that one is more important than the other. It's that they all impact each other. So our team is a huge part of helping us communicate to our clients, and we can't expect them to do that in an effective way if they're unclear what's going on. And then our clients are a really important part of us reaching our community. So it's more about the interplay between them. I'm going to take a breath for a second and pause and see if there are any questions so far.
There have not been any questions that have popped up so far, Catherine.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So you've answered your first 2 questions. What are our objectives and who are we talking to? So the third question, and just as you have your notebook nearby and you're answering these questions for yourself, what you are writing as a crisis communications plan. So the next question that will go into your crisis communications plan is, what is our story? What exactly are we saying? What is the messaging that we are putting out? And this is going to change. And there are 3 concepts I want to share here that are really important. So I've already talked a little bit. I'm going to take the second one first. I've already talked a little bit about internal versus external communications. Thinking through, what are we saying to our team, to our board, to the people that are our internal audience, versus what are we saying to our external audience? And those 2 things shouldn't be contradictory, but the details might be different. With your staff, they're going to want to know about things like remote working, how their hours are impacted, how their pay is impacted, what plan A is, what plan B is, how are we making decisions about when we start to reopen. That's a challenge that a lot of organizations are now facing and are about to face. And then your external communications is a different set of information. And so those 2 things are different, and being very conscious about what you're saying to each audience and who is in charge of that is very, very important. So then I'm going to take this branding versus marketing distinction. And I am obsessed with this distinction because I think that understanding whether you're talking about branding and marketing fundamentally impacts every single communications challenge and question that you might have. So let me go into this a little bit. So these 2 words get thrown around all the time, branding and marketing, and they get thrown around interchangeably and together, but they're very different and they're very distinct. And understanding the distinction between them, I think, can be very, very helpful as you are addressing your communications challenges. So your brand is the same as your organization's personality. And it is really, your brand is made up of who you are and what your organization's core identity is. So what is your vision, your purpose, your mission? What are your values? What is the story? What is the message that you say about your organization? Your brand is reflected in the external appearance of your organization. So your logo, your color palette, your website, your organizational voice. It does not fundamentally alter over time. And the good analogy here is to think about your organization's brand just like an individual's personality. It evolves over time, but it doesn't fundamentally radically change. And really, who you are at your core is who you are at your core. Oh, sorry. Who you are at your core is who you are at your core, and that does not change whether you are an organization or an individual. It is really developed by looking inward and understanding who are we authentically and what do we really care about. And it is most powerful when it focuses on why do we do what we do. So your marketing are the tactics and techniques that you use to communicate your personality or your brand to the outside world. It lives in your communication outreach. It's reflected in your daily communications, your daily tactics. Here's the most important point. Your marketing does change because your marketing is based on looking outwards. You develop your marketing strategy by looking to your target audiences and seeing what they need and what they are going to respond to, and you develop your marketing strategies accordingly. And so your marketing strategies right now are going to change because the outside world has changed. We are living in a completely different world than we were 6 weeks ago. And so this distinction between your brand and your marketing is very, very important as you are figuring out how do we approach our communications and how does this impact our strategy from here on in. So for example, here are the things that shouldn't be changing. You shouldn't be changing who you fundamentally are as an organization, your vision, your purpose, your mission. You shouldn't be really looking at altering that. What you should be changing are your marketing tactics, and maybe not necessarily changing, but certainly reviewing and looking at the organizations that are having the hardest time right now and that are going to struggle the most in the coming weeks and months are those that their brand, their true core, was not solid to begin with, that they weren't completely clear on who they fundamentally are as an organization and what their core driving purpose is. And my advice would be to anybody on this webinar that's thinking that their organization might fall into that category, is to do that work now. And I am happy when I'm not really going to touch on that today, but I'm happy to answer questions about what that process looks like. Because it's going to be very easy to think that the stuff that falls into the left-hand category is the things that you don't have the time or the bandwidth to worry about right now. But I'm telling you that more time spent in the left-hand category will vastly increase your chances of coming out of this and through this in the strongest position possible. That the strength of marketing techniques is very much founded in the strength of the brand. And without a strong brand and very clear connection to your core driving force, your marketing tactics are not going to be as successful. Okay, let me pause for a second. Any questions?
There are no questions at this time.
Okay, great. So let me go back. So in terms of developing what is our story, we've touched on the differences between branding and marketing. We've touched on the differences between external and internal communication. So the other thing I want to talk about is the one paragraph response. So if there is one thing that you take action on from this, it would be this thing. And I'll cover at the end my sort of top 3 takeaways, but this is certainly one, which would be to develop a one paragraph response. And so what do I mean by that? So what I mean by that, and this is an example from Local First, who have a fantastic one paragraph response on their website. And where they start off is committed to Arizona businesses. So right up front and center, they talk about, this is our purpose. This is what we are here to do. This is why we do everything that we do. And then they have phraseology, acknowledging COVID-19, re-emphasizing Local First's role at this time, and what they are going to be doing differently to serve their clientele in new ways at this time. And then on the website below this is 4 different links taking people to different resources that are relevant to them. And so I've broken this down into kind of a template. And if you haven't already, and many of you will have, but if you haven't already, writing this would be an incredibly worthwhile use of your time. And if you have written it already, making sure that you're coming back and revisiting it and updating it regularly. And this is something that would appear on your website, on your social media. Maybe it goes out to your users in email. And the structure is essentially this. In the face of COVID-19, so acknowledging COVID-19 right at the beginning, our organization is beyond grateful to, and that orange text there, you would tweak that to fit your specific needs. Our top priority is, and that's where you insert a description of what's most important to you, and ideally it relates to your core purpose and your core values. We are driven to, and that's where you talk about what is the most important work, and it's no different in these unusual times. Instead, we are pursuing this work in new ways, including, and that's when you put in the details of what your change services look like, what your new initiatives are, what you are offering for the local community. And then, we'll continue to provide updates. And then this last orange part that's highlighted, let us know how we can support you in these times, that you would tailor to your audience, and that's really your call to action. So do you want people to increase their or to consider you as their pickup food delivery for dinner? Do you want them to donate? Do you want them to share this post on their Facebook page? Whatever it might be, that's where you put your target audience specific call to action. Just going to linger on that for a second so you can take that in. Okay, so to date, we have answered 3 questions. We've answered what are our goals, who is our target audience, and what is our story. So the next question is, what is our strategy? What are the things that we are doing? Now, I could spend another hour talking about this because the specific tactics that you're using is very, very specific to your organization. So the general framework I would recommend following is this. Look at everything you were doing already in terms of your marketing strategies and ask, what will we stop? What will we continue? And what will we start? And give yourself permission to think about things in a different way. And of course, when you're looking at these strategies and asking these questions, you're going to have your goals very much in mind. These are our goals. And so we're going to change these strategies accordingly. And of course, the other thing I want to come back to is this difference between branding and marketing is that your strategies do change. Marketing strategies change. And so pivoting a little and doing things differently at the moment doesn't mean it's permanent. You can use this framework again and again and again for developing your communication tactics and strategies on an ongoing basis. And then some other things to continue to help answer these questions. What will we start? What will we continue? What will we start? Try these things. Call your customers and ask them what they need. Make sure that you are telling your story. Be very true to who you are as an organization. It comes back to that idea of not pandering to new customers or doing what other people are doing. If you do one thing, tell your story of how you are serving your customers in these times. Do test and iterate. Try new things. See how it goes. Say we're going to do this thing for 3 weeks and we'll see. And if it's worthwhile, if we're getting ROI on it, we'll continue. If we're not, we won't. Do set clear roles. Be very clear about who on your team is responsible for what when it comes down to your communications. And, I think don't try and do too much. This isn't necessarily the time to try and do more of things, but instead evaluate your bandwidth and make smart decisions about what you're going to invest your time in the interest of meeting your goals. And then update your 1-paragraph response regularly. That 1-paragraph response, and I'll come back to the template version, it really is the core of your message that you are going to use. And when you write that 1-paragraph response, not only is it something that you can put up on your website and on your social media, but anytime you have to write anything, you can come back to it. It's also something you can share with your team, with your board of directors, with other people that rely on you, because they then know what you are doing. Okay, so the top 3 things from today that I really want to emphasize are, number 1, don't run at the pool. That panic is contagious. If you need to take a second and take a really deep breath before you decide what to do or what to say to whom, it will pay dividends for you. Number 2, write and post your 1-paragraph response. And then I guess my subline on that is update it regularly and share it regularly. And number 3, don't stop asking. No matter what you do, don't stop asking, because that is to undermine the value of what you offer. One of the questions that I'm getting a lot, particularly from nonprofits, but some businesses as well, is we don't offer an essential service. And so it's harder for us to fundraise or provide value compared to those organizations that are providing essential services. And I completely understand that rationale and that feeling. And I share 2 points in response to that question specifically. One is that was always true. It was always true that what you offered did not fall into this essential service category. I think that language we're using is particularly heightened and sensitive right now. And also this feeling that we're in crisis and therefore those things are more important. But this idea of comparing yourself and your value to what another organization offers misses, I think, a really large point. And this is the second point. So something I hear people say all the time when they're talking about their service is it's not rocket science and it's we're not curing cancer. And those are 2 very those are two very common phrases that people seem to say over and over and over. And I've always had a hard time with those, even more so now, because what it does is it really overlooks how interconnected we all are. And so what Javelina does is we're not producing rocket science, and we're not curing cancer on a daily basis. And we are also providing a service that is fundamental and invaluable for our nonprofit businesses and our nonprofit clients and business clients that rely on our ability to help them communicate. That the people that are curing cancer go to eat at local restaurants and are very reliant on their ability to connect with their friends and their families and their loved ones. I think what coronavirus has shown in a very stark way is how interconnected we all are, and we all provide a value. And so really getting truly connected to the value that you offer, and that comes back to your brand. What is your brand? What is your core driver? And being able to articulate that internally and externally was always important, but it's more important now than ever. And so I guess if I was going to add a fourth to my top three takeaways, it would come back to this idea of what is your brand? And if you are not super crystal clear on what your brand is, and what lies at that core, then now is absolutely the time to spend time figuring that out. And what I've noticed about these two lists is these branding and marketing headers. You could quite literally switch out the word branding for core identity and switch out the word marketing for actions, and it's the same list. That there is this distinction between your core identity and your actions, and then they are interlinked, but your actions are based on your core identity. The core identity is the rock, it's the foundation, it's the ground, and the actions are the tree that grows out of that. And if you feel like your core fundamental branding identity isn't as strong as it could be, now and the next few weeks and months are absolutely the time to focus on that. And I will mention, Javelina, we are testing interest in doing a free workshop for organizations that would go over a few weeks and essentially run them through a process for reevaluating their core identity. And so I'll make sure to share that link. Right now it's just a Google form, and we're seeing how much of an appetite there is. And if people are interested in it, then we'll run this free workshop. And so I'll be sure to share that with Local First so that we can get that link out to everybody on this call today. Okay, questions?
All right, there was one question that came through from John that says, as far as testing, how do you determine the length or sample size?
Great question. So it doesn't have to be super scientific, honestly. This is one of my favorite things about testing is you can kind of pick and the sample size can be really pretty small. So obviously it depends on the thing that you're testing. So let me use a couple of examples. So let's say you are going to try free content strategy and you're going to offer webinars, and you've never done that before, and you think, maybe I'll offer webinars on the thing that is expertise to me, and I'll see how much ROI it gets. So the most important thing when you're talking about testing results is test your result compared to what you saw before, not your expectation. So oftentimes we'll think, okay, we'll throw something up on Facebook, and we've never done this before, and our expectation is that we'll get 40 shares. But if you've never done that before and you get 3 shares, that's actually 300% than you ever got before. And so making sure that you're setting expectations really realistically is very important. And so I think in terms of, Melissa, can you tell me the question again? I'll make sure I'm hitting on it.
It just says, let me scroll back up to it. As far as testing, how do you determine the length or sample size?
Length or sample size. Okay, so length, it depends hugely on the thing. I'm wondering if the person that asked that question can share more about a specific example, because it really depends.
Sure, more than happy to. Okay, so I guess so we just kind of started getting into Google advertising and just doing and more like social media advertising, specifically on LinkedIn. And great timing to begin a new endeavor right as all of this started to culminate. So I like it's difficult to know what is like in this new normal, what should be expected as far as traffic and conversion rates and things like that when our baseline it started in the middle of this crisis. So
Right.
it's really hard to know what should be the realistic expectations. And so we test things and it's like, okay, well, it almost feels like every day or every week it's things can change very quickly. And we're all kind of wondering what's going to happen in Arizona for the next month. So that's where we're kind of caught up as far as how long do we test something when the information changes sometimes on the daily.
Totally. Yeah. And I think one of the real struggles of right now, but also something that's really powerful, is that there really isn't any quote unquote should. That usually when you're testing this kind of thing, we do have kind of expectations and benchmarks based on typical online behavior. And right now that's completely out of the window. And so there really isn't, to your exact point, there isn't a baseline of like, what should we be expecting? And so instead, what I would encourage you to do is align it with your goal. So if come back to how is success defined for us in this? Is it new customers? Is it engagement? However that goal is defined, and then set up your key performance indicators that you're looking at. I would think with social media advertising, you really want, if you're posting daily, you really want to give it at least 2 weeks and see what the trends are. If it's not daily content, probably more than that, like 3 or 4 weeks. And then decide, these are the key performance indicators we're going to look at without setting a goal. So we're going to look at engagement rate, share rate, comment rate, conversion to website traffic, for example. Track those 4 metrics over 4 weeks, and then see what the patterns are. And then make an assessment of, okay, there's enough data here for us to continue this, or we need to, we're not going to. There's not enough for us to think that this is converting for us. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. It's just weird times, So.
It is. It's super weird times. And I think in a way, like I would kind of take that fact almost as a gift rather than a curse. And realize that the rules are kind of out of the window, that, and also how people interact, it have completely changed. So internet time is up, but time on desktop is massively up, and mobile usage, or the proportion of internet time that is on mobile, has radically fallen because people are just spending so much time on laptops and desktops. And then, podcast listening is way down, streaming is way up. And so these are temporary behavior changes, and is a good time to test, but it's probably not going to tell you anything for your long-term strategies. It's really only going to tell you what's working now.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Melissa?
Monica, and I'm not sure I understand the question, but maybe you will. It just says, please repeat 4 tracking trends.
4 tracking trends?
Yeah, Monica, do you want to unmute yourself and see, maybe explain a little bit more?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, you mentioned 4 tracking trends where you were suggesting that if you were going to test a testing time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the sort of the metrics you would look at.
Yes.
I think I said engagement, numbers of engagements, numbers of shares, conversion to website traffic, and number of comments maybe. And I think I was just sort of talking off the top of my head, but those are sort of examples of when you are looking at how effective your online content is, always sort of thinking about what are all the things that we measure. So what data is available to us via Facebook, and what data is available to us for our Google Analytics, and what are the things that we care about. And it can be helpful case.
Yes, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
A lot of energy into making it funny and engaging, and we have determined that our open rate is more important to us than our click rate. And so what we look at when we look at the success of a newsletter is the open rate. So it's not about sort of measuring everything, but more so picking the things that you're measuring.
All right, we had one more question come through. It is from April, and she asks, as a marketing business, will you please share some asks Javelina is using during COVID-19?
Yeah. So the asks, the big one is that we're still pitching. We're still asking people to hire us, and we're still doing it in the fundamental of how we're doing it is the same, and that we're finding people that have a need that we can provide genuine value. So that's kind of the big one. The other asks that we're making of people, and depending on who the audience is, but we are communicating how we think we can add value and asking people to connect us with those that we think have a need. And then we are doing a lot more content, and we're asking people to download, read, and share our content. So those are 3 asks that we're making.
All right, that was the last question.
Great. Thank you guys so much. And thank you again to Local First for hosting. I hope this provided helpful information.
Yep, and thank you very much, Catherine. This webinar will be uploaded to the LFA website at www.localfirstaz.com/COVID webinars. So you should see it there by about tomorrow. So make sure I noticed a lot of people kind of joined halfway through. So definitely, I recommend going back and watching the webinar from the start. And please feel free to share with friends and coworkers. Also, just remember we do have another webinar coming up on Friday. We have been hosting them on Wednesdays. So this one's on a Friday at noon, and it's with Ideas Collide. So I highly recommend heading over to our page and checking that one out and registering for that if you haven't already. Thank you everyone for joining us, and I will see you at the next webinar.